Hey, everybody. I wanted to take a moment to introduce this next podcast episode. This is not actually a part of the halftime podcast. This is a part of another project that I've been invited to be a part of by Rob Byrd. Some of you may know him, but he is just starting his own podcast called All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About. That's an attention getter, isn't it? He's talking about all kinds of different things. In this particular episode, we're talking about the decline of religion in America. And he has invited me at different times to be a part of his podcast as kind of one of the kind of the religion or the faith perspective in his studio, in his guest team. And so I get to be a part of that on a periodic basis. There will be several videos actually that I'll be uploading that are a part of this podcast series. As you watch this, if you're watching on YouTube, this is not recorded video. So you'll notice that after this particular intro video, there'll just be a static image on the screen. So you're not going to want to sit and watch the screen, but you can still put in some AirPods and listen to the episode and get all the content out of it. Of course, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, it'll come across just like any other podcast that you're listening to. This is an exciting opportunity for me, and I wanted to share all of these episodes that I'm in with Rob with you, the rest of my audience. And so I'd love to hear some feedback, some of your thoughts on that. And then, of course, if you like this podcast episode and you're curious about the other work that Rob is doing, the other episodes that I'm not necessarily in, feel free to use the information on the static screen to go and try some of his other episodes and see if you'd like to subscribe to his podcast as well. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, I will have the contact information in the show notes. So you can also go and check out his podcast there. All right. So this is my conversation with Rob and also the other guests, Scott and Amanda. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast. This podcast will explore all the subjects that make the insecure squirm in their seats. Religion, politics, local and national, the Constitution of the United States, the wheel of love and hate, and mental illness, to just name a few. Stay with us as we use our freedom of speech to delve into the good and the bad. If this podcast is not for you, feel free to find another one. Without any further ado, here comes all the things they don't want you to talk about. All right, welcome to another episode of All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About. This one's going to be a little bit in our religion series. And studio panel here in the studio is Scott T. Good day to you, Scott.
Good day.
Amanda Jones is here in the studio. Good day to you.
Good day.
And our special guest, who I'm hoping will be doing more of these with us, is Mylan Bittenbender. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I kind of being the first in our series that deals with religion, I wanted to talk a little bit about, when we look around the world these days, for me being a 53-year-old man, I look around and say, this is not the world that I recognize that it's been. There's been so many changes, especially the last 8 years, I would say. And even the last 3.5 have been even faster changes. But, what I see is there's a lot of people that don't care about anybody else anymore. They don't care about the people. We got social media out there that everybody writes whatever they think, whatever thought comes to their head, they think they should write it. And, and I do believe people should have opinions, of course, and it's nice to have a platform where they can bring them out. Mm-hmm. But it seems like we've transcended or descended into a place that it's just, some of it's really good and been positive stuff, but the other is just so vile and awful and mean. And I kind of see that we have are maybe declining in our civilization from where we are. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, and especially kind of in whether it's a biblical or a religious or a spiritual kind of way, talk about where you see this being a man that's been in the clergy, a pastor, and someone who's the Bible has been, I don't know how long you have embraced the Bible, how long, but I know you've done it for a long time. So that's what we want to talk about. And to start, I just wanted to ask you what you see. What's your take on our world and morals and the way people treat each other?
That's a very
broad question. How much time do I have?
And we've got as much time as we need, almost limitless.
Well,
as far as drive space on the computer goes.
Yeah. Well, I clearly see what you're talking about. I see it, and pretty much everybody I talk to thinks the same way. I don't think. I mean, you're definitely dealing with something all of us are feeling. The first thing that comes to my mind, though, is this isn't anything new. My parents said this. Mm-hmm. My grandparents said this. Our great-grandparents said this. So it is a trajectory of society, and especially a society that doesn't have good, clear boundaries. And we've gotten to this place where everybody is their own ruler, their own president. Mm-hmm. Part of the whole. Everybody's got their own opinions. Is, hey, I'm just as qualified to be the ruler of this whole deal as anybody else.
Right.
And so, there was a portion of the Bible in the Judges where it talked about. Everybody had their own mind about what was going on. There was no solid leadership. There was no rule. So everybody felt that, they could rule how they saw fit. Basically, chaos.
Sure.
And we see that as the pattern that our culture is chasing after. We see the results of it, but for whatever reason, we can't see the warning signs and the fact that this isn't a good direction for us. Mm-hmm. So we see this decline that you're talking about. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And I had talked to you the other day about this, and I said something, and you corrected me, because we talked about people falling away from religion, but I think I said something also to the effect of that millennials, there was actual an uptick in millennials seeking, whether it was God or seeking the church or spirituality, whatever they're seeking, that they're actually starting to ask questions. Actually, you corrected me on the divorce rate when I said it was going up. You said it was actually going down, and you said that was because there's actually a lot less people getting divorced or getting married.
Right.
So, get back to where we were. So, that's kind of where I saw that. And, what did you think about that?
Well, I think it's great. Again, there's a cycle. We see this. Young people, there seems to be like a pendulum swing in society, right? Mm-hmm. We see the pendulum swing one way toward conservatism or toward, hey, what used to be? What are we missing that we used to have? What was good about the past, and what maybe have we lost our moorings on and have gone away from? And there seems to be a swing in that direction, and then inevitably it swings the other direction, and everybody forgets about that. I mean, we see it through different events. 9/11, we'll never forget. Well, heck, we forgot months later.
Yeah.
And so, that's definitely something that we see happening over and over again. My answer was sort of negative. We see it all the time. What does it mean? Nothing. That's not what I'm saying. I have hope in that. And I always do believe. I believe that God is at work in this world. And I do believe that God is doing certain things. The question is, how are we going to respond to what he's doing? Yeah. Are we going to embrace it? Are we going to run with it? Or are we going to allow the pendulum to swing the other way and lose interest because it just doesn't hold anything important for us?
Sure. Okay. Well, and I'm going to give just a quick background on me, because I don't want this isn't about me, but I want to give my quick background on why I've decided that I want to talk about this stuff. And I guess this is my way to seek out light.
Sure.
I'm a Mason. That's part of our who we're supposed to be, as someone always looking for light, looking for enlightenment, looking for what might be in the dark. And, we had a lot of different, the last 3-4 weeks have been pretty crazy with the radio show and all this stuff. And I found myself in a battle with myself. How do I respond to this? Do I respond to this with anger? Do I come at it full bore and let someone have it? Do I sit back and do nothing? Do I find something to do in the middle? And for a couple of weeks, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I mean, the human side of me wants vengeance, but it's like, that is not how it should be. I feel sorry for people that do what has happened, because to me, it seems like they don't have anything else in their life other than to attack people. Yeah. But as I'm thinking about, how do I go about this? How do I get out the word? How do I do this in a way that's true to myself? And God popped into my head. And at that point, I said, okay, that's the tipping point. Now, the quick deal on my life, I was made to go to church every Sunday. Every Sunday when Mom came down and said it's time to go to church, I'm like, Mom, I don't want to go to church. Well, I went until I was 18 years old, went off to college, never stepped foot in church again. I've been in there for weddings and funerals and stuff like that, but never have gone back to a worship service other than a Sunday service. All right, Easter service, excuse me. And Scott tells me people go to Easter services because breakfast is served. But and now at 53 years old, I'm starting to search, I think, a little bit more about something greater than myself, greater than the things I'm doing, greater than the people around me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I decided, okay, it's time to start looking back at this. And to me, let's even play devil's advocate. God is not real. But the things that have been laid out in the Bible and the rules that have been laid out in the Bible are certainly valid. And for how we should treat each other and go about our lives. Now, I'm not saying that because I do believe in God, but that was just a devil's advocate statement. But so where do we go with this? I mean, there certainly, I believe there's been a decline in the church and in people going to church. Why do you think that is? Because there's all kinds of different churches. You got the mega churches, you got small churches, you got Baptist churches, you got Catholic churches, you've got Christian or Reformed churches, all these different kind of churches. And it's so very confusing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm really pleased, happy for you that you're kind of at least looking. You know, for a lot of people, they never look back.
Right.
And I feel like they're missing some very, very important things. My hope is that you find what you're looking for. You gain a fresh perspective. And I think, you know, part of what we're seeing is that people know that the church is not God. It's not synonymous with God.
And
unfortunately,
people, they conflate that all the time.
Unfortunately, we kind of engage with church under that kind of almost subconscious assumption. And so when church fails us, we make that connection with God, that God has failed us. And I'm just here to tell you, the church is full of human beings. We're all broken. We're all messed up. And the church will fail you. And so, you know, what I've always tried to do and continue to try to do is say, hey, what can we do to get things, including the church, out from between you and God? And I used this illustration just a few minutes ago in our conversation before the podcast, but you know, this idea when back in the 80s, you know, we had cassette tapes and we would, you know, make a copy of our favorite songs either off the radio or something like that. And we'd make a mixtape. And then our friends would hear our mixtape and go, ooh, can you make me a copy of that? Yeah, I'll make you a copy of that. So we'd throw another cassette in the dual cassette and we'd make a copy of that. And then their friends would hear their tape and they'd want a copy of that.
Right.
And by the time you got, you know, 3 or 4, each one added a little bit of distortion. And by the time you got 4 or 5 copies in, it sounded like crap.
Kind of like the telephone game.
The telephone.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, the fax is another analogy with that. And they even talk about with cloning. If you keep cloning the same thing over again, you are going to lose information.
Yeah. And so a little bit less so in the digital age, but back in the analog age, we definitely saw that.
We sure did.
And in some ways, anytime that we view God through human organizations, human beings, human experience, we're getting a little bit of a distortion. And what I see happening, and maybe happened to you, is that you are getting, you know, something from a local church that was passed down through a denomination, that was passed down through a theologian, that was passed down through. And my question is, how clear of a picture of God did you truly get in that experience?
Yeah. I remember coming down to my grandparents' basement to see a picture of a high-rise building with Jesus standing 150 foot tall, looking in the window.
Yeah.
That's what, I mean, that's my image of Jesus with his beard. I mean, we've all seen movies, but at my earliest ages, that's my most impressionable picture, was coming down my grandparents at 6, 7, 8 years old, seeing that picture down at the bottom of the stairs with Jesus knocking on a window. Then he's as tall as the high rise.
Yeah, I think that was the NATO. The image there was that Jesus is trying to get into the United Nations for good purposes,
Right,
and
right.
they're all in there doing their little thing, and he's on the outside. You know.
Okay. Well, I get that now. I get that analogy, but that's my vision of when I can think back. So, what do you think
Sure.
of Jesus? That's it. You've seen the Mel Gibson movie, Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's always one of those movies that I would always say it's always good to go back and revisit that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It demonstrates the love of God, a love that is filled with both grace and truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, every good movie has to have a good name, and they named that movie perfectly. So,
Yeah.
Amanda, Scott, do you have any questions?
Oh,
Go ahead, Scott.
go ahead. If you have questions, I don't have questions. I have statements.
Go make a statement, then,
Go ahead.
Scott.
So I just didn't want to, one of the things that you said there, Rob, about, as children, we feel forced to go because we're being drugged.
Right.
And I'm much the same. I was raised in the church. They built the foundation, but as you became an adult, you're like, yeah, bye.
Better things to do on Sunday,
And, but I still had that foundation.
Yeah.
So, and you go through, and I'm just going to share a quick testimony, if I may. I was over road truck driver, went through life, family, divorce, blah, blah, blah. So, but I always prayed. I don't know why, even though I didn't attend church, even though I always prayed. And I was going through troubles and I mean, the truck's breaking down, all this stuff, and you keep praying, and nothing, it keeps getting worse. And you're like, so finally one day I was just like, you know what, heck with you, God, you don't even exist. And went to bed angry, got up the next morning, work on my truck, I'm throwing tools, I'm just acting like a 5-year-old in a temper tantrum. Guy walks up, he goes, you've been having problems. And I'm like, who the heck are you? And he's like, God sent me here to talk to you. And I'm like, get out of here, And I'm like, get out of here. And he goes, no. He goes, I'm on a dedicated run. He goes, I don't have time to stop. He goes, he kept telling me, stop. And he said, I pulled in this lot. I said, where am I supposed to go? And here I am. I'll tell you, I bawled for an hour. I mean, but at that point, I was like, God's here.
Yeah.
And he says, you're mine, and that's just something that we, life still is going to get in way.
Yeah.
But it's just, he's here for us, and we have to go to him. And I think that's what, even like Rob's experiencing now. So
That's great, man. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And I've said this a few times, and I still feel weird when I say it. I've talked to you the other day when you and I talked for a couple hours. It seemed like a couple hours because we went through some pretty heady stuff. And I had said something to you towards the end of our conversation about that. I've been trying to find, I like to take off my shoes and grab a hold of a tree and hug it for 30 seconds. And then you talked to me about the mind, body, the spirit connection to grounding yourself with the earth. And talk a little bit about that because, like I said, I feel really weird saying it, but I've been doing about 3 weeks, and it just kind of, I feel like my attitude is entirely different.
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking a few minutes ago about the copy of the copy of the copy, or the distance between the original and where we stand now. And we live in a world that's increasingly artificial, more and more artificial all the time. I believe that God created us, according to the Bible, literally formed us from the dust of the ground and breathed into us the breath of life. And, we get this picture of, God huddled over a mound of mud, basically, and giving it CPR, breathing into it the breath of life, the spirit. And it says that, and the man became a living being. Now, fast forward a few thousand years,
Right.
and we have become incredibly disconnected from that narrative, that spiritual experience, literally the ground that we were taken from. I mean, how many people now know how to even plant a garden and harvest food?
Right.
The food that we eat is, it's Frankenfood, right?
Right.
We have processed the heck out of everything. So it's not even really, I mean, the Bible tells us that God created the food for us to eat. So here we have the manufacturer putting together the product and then the fuel for the product and saying, man, this is a perfect match. This is going to work out great. And we all go, no, I think we got better ideas.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of those ideas are surrounded, by our desire to make money or profit or, whatever. And we end up, and so much of it is driven by this humanistic perspective on life in the world. And humanism is the idea that we don't need God. We are our own gods. So, why would we stay connected to God and what he created? We can do this better ourselves. So the whole artificial thing is all about, we can do better. We can do better. And we continue to be, quote unquote, our own saviors and build our own world. And so I kind of got off on a tangent. Did I answer your question?
That happens all the time. I don't know. I was just listening.
I kind of, back to the humanism versus being your own God type thing. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about it for a while now, but like, we're in our own little worlds. We are kind of like our own little God. I have animals and I have to tend to those animals. If I don't tend to the animals, they'll starve or they'll get killed by something around that comes through, a coyote or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And even down to, oh no, there's a trail of ants running in front of me. Do I smash them or do I just let them be? And I don't know. I just kind of looked at it that way.
If there are carpenter ants, you smash them.
Or those red ants.
And that's
those are mean and nasty.
Yes, they are. And then, but then there's also a philosophical debate there with these are God's creatures.
Yeah.
But yet they do harm to us in many ways sometimes.
But we're supposed to have like dominion over them and like...
I was just going to say, I'm going to sound like a broken record today because I really believe we have got to return back to Genesis, the beginning of the story.
I don't think people will understand until we become broken records and they hear it over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
Well, because God wants us to take care of the earth. All these gifts around us we're supposed to take care of. And I don't think a lot of people, like you said, don't even know how to plant a garden. Or even make stuff from scratch, cookies from scratch, or brownies from scratch. It's, I got to get the box. Now just add these ingredients, it's done.
Yeah.
Well, I personally can tell the difference between an item baked by somebody who is loving what they're doing, putting the ingredients in, versus this box was processed and put together on a machine. Here you go.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's the fuel we're putting in our bodies, the energy that somebody put into even baking a meal.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe I just got on a little tangent too, but
back to what you were saying a minute ago. We get confused about our role again. I think because we don't know the story, right? But if you go back and you read in those early chapters of Genesis, the first couple of chapters of Genesis, God creates Adam and Eve, and he gives them the task of taking dominion over creation and taking care of creation.
Right.
That's the function that he gave us in the very beginning. Not the man over the woman, but the man with the woman, the two of them together ruling over, taking dominion over creation.
Yeah.
Now, the unhealthy step that we have taken is, rather than under God being the caretakers or the stewards of this creation, we want to become rulers of in a more godlike sense, right?
Yeah.
I use this illustration oftentimes of what I envision as Milan land. Okay, that's this.
I'm visiting it now too. It's in there. Is there a Ferris wheel in Milan land?
A merry-go-round. No, there's each one of us has this vision of our own little kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And the American dream is what? Build your own little kingdom.
Yeah.
This space where you reign and rule over the people around you and the circumstances underneath you and the stuff that's put into your hands. And we feel like our job is to create our own little kingdom. And we're even told that that's what the American dream. You can build your own little kingdom and it can look the way you want it. And so, we've taken an unhealthy step from stewards of God's kingdom to builders of our own little kingdoms. And really, that's what humanism is all about, right? I can be my own God. The problem is, and this is where, Rob, I think it gets back to the impetus behind this whole conversation is why this decline, why this rolling into chaos? Because when you have 7 billion gods all competing for their own little kingdoms, and all of these kingdoms back up right next to each other and ultimately flow over one another, you get chaos.
You do. I feel that. I feel that very much in society today.
Yeah.
And a lot of people lost.
Yeah.
And not knowing things. And I walked away from religion about 8 years ago, grew up Mormon, did the whole thing. Wednesdays, Sundays, early morning seminaries every single day. And, you know, when I first went into the military, I was played it on, like, I'm never going to church again. But I still went. And it wasn't until my early 30s that I stepped away. And a lot of it had to do with, you know, maybe more political, social issues, and just being very confused on things because I have compassion in my heart, and I felt that I needed to give others compassion too. And I felt, but now that I'm stepping back and looking at the way my life was, I'm so happy that I was raised the way I was.
Yeah.
I learned to be self-sufficient. I learned to not rely on the government. I learned to grow my own food. I learned for food prepping, food storage, 72-hour kits. I learned what the end of days was, and I didn't realize it until now at 40, and I'm grateful for it. And I don't know, just even hearing Scott, it reminds me of the stories my dad tells on when he's on the road, and stuff like that happens all the time. And I don't know, like, I don't want to get emotional, so yeah.
Well,
but
when we're
I
talking
feel it.
about religion and God, I guess that's probably one of those places where you should get emotional.
I know, but I think it's just looking back at, like, where did it all come apart? Why did I step away? Why did I really step away? And I have brought my scriptures with me today, and it's the first time I've opened this in a long time. And it brings back a lot, because when I went to church, I had my family. And after I left church, I lost my family. And I don't know why. And it still hurts. I don't understand, but I do at the same time. So, sorry.
It's all right.
No, that's
See, we asked for emotion and we got some.
there you go.
That's right.
Hey, if we can't get emotional about it, and I think that's one of the big problems, is that even Christianity or whatever religious system we're a part of has become so corporatized, right?
Yeah.
That we've tried to disconnect it from the soul or from our heart.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the first things when I opened it up, I saw my tithes and offering receipts, and the Latter-day Saint religion, they don't order it, but it's highly recommended. You pay 10% of your gross income type of thing. And it helped. It really made us struggle. We struggled a lot.
Sure.
But at the same time, we were very, very blessed. And I look back and I still don't know if it was right to pay tithes, because, you know, the Mormon religion is one of the top 4 richest religions. They don't need any more money. Same time, it's like, well, how can I give without actually giving money? You know what I mean? And give my time. I can
Give to the church. There's lots
I
of
can
ways
give with my
to give,
talents and stuff like that. And so I've been trying lately to find different things to use my talents to, you know, just give back.
Sure.
Yeah, I try the same way. I'm half Dutch. Giving up the money is real hard, and I don't and I don't believe that I am greedy at all. I try to make what I need to make my business go and to feed myself and to be able to help those around me when they need it. You know, so I'm not trying to get rich doing anything. So I guess that's where I kind of, you know, it's hard to give up that money.
Sure.
But, you know, and you got to think about other ways to give to the church, because, and one of the nice things, churches have pantries, they have food pantries, they have all kinds of different things, and there are certainly ways that you can, and not only will that make you feel good about you doing something, you'll connect with other people who always have the same, likewise, they feel the same way. They're out there because it makes them feel good to help other people. It's not just because, oh, look at me, I'm a helper. Every once in a while, you might see someone like that say, yeah, I think that guy does it just so he can tell people that he helps. But then you see everybody else, and you know that they're there because they really want to help.
Yeah. Well, it all comes back to mindset. How do we view ourselves? How do we view God? How do we view those around us? And, you know, the scriptures teach us that we are a steward of everything that's entrusted, not just our money. like you said, our gifts and abilities, our time, our energy, our relationships, our resources, the things that anything that's put into our hands is not for me to build Mylan land, my own kingdom for my own glory, but it's intended for me to be a good steward, a caretaker of this world, not just the planet, terra firma, but the world that God has created, the people in it, the systems that make it up. Yeah. And we have an opportunity to steward that well. And, you mentioned the 10% in church world. Excuse me. In church world, we often refer to the tithe and stewardship always in financial terms, and that you're supposed to give so much. But the truth is that as a steward, I recognize that none of this is mine. The 100%. I, out of faith, give 10%, but even the rest of the 90% isn't mine. It's just in my hands, and I have an opportunity to steward it well. Yeah.
Okay. I guess getting back to maybe this decline that we feel in America, maybe it's the whole world. I'm not a whole worldly guy. I can really tell you the decline I see is right here in Southwest Michigan. I mean, I've been around almost every state. I've been almost in every province in Canada. But at the same time, this is where I see it. This is where I'm at all the time. This is where I notice everything. And if there is a true decline in not necessarily religion or people going to the church, is it the church that's causing some of this? Because let's look at mega churches. A few years ago, I was searching and I went to a couple of mega churches, different ones, one in Granville, one in Grand Rapids. And as I was in there, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Look how big this is. Look at all these people. But they're dancing, they're singing, there's music, and it's Christian music, but it's a rock show. Yeah. It's a rock concert is what it was. Then the pastor would come in and talk 20 minutes and do his thing. Then it's a show again. It, to me, seemed such a big show. And then after we got done, we went to the church's restaurant and had omelets and ate. And I didn't see anybody, other families, all together. It was just your own family together. It wasn't like fellowship or anything. Mm-hmm. And then, make sure you head over to the bookstore before you leave. And after you go to the bookstore, we had a whole bunch of other gifts, a gift store where you can get products and all that stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is not church. This is a business. This is a corporation. This is, and it's a money-making entity. And yes, I realize that the church has to bring in money to pay their bills, to pay their property taxes, to pay everything that they need to. But then you look, and you need some money to actually go out and you have to go out and minister and leave the church. But then there's a point where it's like, wow, this is just too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to one of those in Dallas. Same thing. When I came out of the main room there, I guess, they had little tables set up where they were selling us. And it reminded me of the story when Jesus went in the temple and they were selling, and he uprooted all the tables and stuff. And I was like, oh my, that's exactly the story it reminded me of. I said, this is what it's become.
Do you know why Jesus was so upset? A lot of people aren't, they see that story and then go, yeah, Jesus got angry too. And that's kind of the moral of the story. But really what was happening there is all of the money changers and that they were allowed to set up their market. Now, it started out with good intentions. So people would come from all over the nation to Israel to worship at the temple. And they would come, and part of their worship was making sacrifices. Well, there would be families who didn't necessarily have the sheep or the doves or the whatever they needed for their family sacrifice, so they had to buy something. So they would bring whatever their grain or their money or their whatever, and they needed to be able to buy a lamb for their sacrifice or whatever. And so it started out, in this kind of innocent way as a place to provide for the people that were coming to make their sacrifices. But they were allowed to set up in what was called the court of the Gentiles. The court of the Gentiles, when the temple was laid out, was supposed to be the place where people who were not Israelites could come and worship. It was a place where they could come and view what was happening in the worship of the one true God. And what happened over time was that the whole economic opportunity of buying and selling, I've got sheep, but I also sell pottery. And then, somebody else comes in and they want to compete. And before long, it was a massive flea market. Mm-hmm. And where the Gentiles, the people that were not of Jewish descent, could come and worship and pray and observe the worship of God and be a part of it, that space was filled with this noisy. I mean, imagine, being in Shipshawana and trying to worship God in the midst of all of that chaos, right? And so the people of God, and it's very clear in the Old Testament that God blessed the nation of Israel to be a blessing to the rest of the world. In other words, they weren't supposed to keep God's favor all for themselves. Again, they were supposed to be stewards of God's favor. So God would bless them, and then from that, people would come to Israel, come to Jerusalem, and they would worship God, and they would meet the one true God there. And so he was supposed, through that, to be a blessing to the rest of the world. Well, those Gentiles would come in, and all they saw was a flea market. They never met God there. And so when Jesus, saw that, he was like, you were blessed to be a blessing, and now you've basically turned off. So back to what you were saying, Rob. Unfortunately, a lot of times that's what happens in these churches, right? Now we've got this big space between God and an actual encounter with the living God because of all of these different things. Mm-hmm. And it starts out innocently. I've been wrapped up in it. I can't point a finger at anybody else. As a leader in the church, there were times when I would think, oh, people would really like this. People would enjoy this. This might help attract people, or whatever.
You have to market to be a church and attract people to your church. It's a slippery slope.
There's this weird cycle. A lot of it has to do with the culture that we live in. And the culture demands you have to please me, otherwise you have nothing for me, right? Yeah. And unfortunately in church world, we get wrapped up in that a little bit. Okay, well, we'll please you just a little bit. We'll offer you the scrambled eggs or the books that you like or the music that you like, the experience that you like, right? Come, we're cool.
Right.
We're good. You can hang with us and you can enjoy your experience with us. And then too often times it starts out innocently, but grows into something that really becomes this barrier between the people who are coming in and a genuine, real encounter with the living God.
Yeah. And now, what would you think when we talk about a decline of religion or God, philosophy to it, whatever it may be? What would you think is the number one reason for that?
Oh boy, it's hard to put a finger on the number one reason, but I think we've been talking about one of the huge reasons is because people come into the church and they don't meet God.
Right.
They see an organization, and if they don't have that genuine encounter with the living God, they go home, they think, oh, that's what Christianity is? Okay, well, that's cool. I'll hang with that for a while. But somewhere down the line, that experience is going to turn out badly. Yeah. They're gonna run into somebody who treats them bad. Yeah. They're gonna have somebody's gonna gossip about them. And then the church, which was their focal point, will fail them. And in that, then, like I said, they associate that with God himself, and then they throw the whole thing away. Yeah.
And let me share another little story growing up. I grew up going to Hope Church here in South Haven, and it was a great place, a lot of great people. Mm-hmm. My father never went to church, and a couple times he did, I remember, and I asked, well, why don't you go anymore? And he was always kind of more about the people that are there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the people there, they're all good people. They're, here to worship God and they believe in God. How can that be a bad thing? Well, what he would say to me was, well, we go to church, we do the church service and then go down and have fellowship afterwards. And there's all these business people and people that are from South Haven around that I know, or that we know, and we talk to them face to face, this and that. Well, I see them on the sidewalk on Monday and they look the other way and keep on walking. Yeah. And he said that to me, that was the biggest turnoff because it just seems like everybody was really two-faced. Here they are, warm and welcoming on Sunday, but buttholes on Monday.
Yeah.
See, I never experienced that. We'd always be like, oh no, there's sister so-and-so. And I don't know. They still come up to me like they're my family still, even though I haven't fellowshipped or went to the church in a while. Besides on Christmas, I go for my mom. But I don't know. I didn't feel that experience at my church.
Well, then consider yourself blessed.
Yeah. And not to say there's not drama and stuff, because there is. But
yeah.
I look at a lot of those ladies as they helped raise me.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from some of them, and either things to do or not to do.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience for me.
Yeah, and not to mean that most of those people do is a positive thing. That was just how, my dad, that's how he felt. Mm-hmm. Okay, I just talked to you for 15 minutes the other day, face to face, drinking coffee, and today you don't recognize me. What happened between yesterday and today?
That's almost like Facebook. I talk to you on Facebook all the time, and I see you on the street, and you don't even know me.
Well, now I get worried with Facebook because I
picture.
have some people on there I wouldn't know them in real life.
Oh yeah,
it's scary.
So a lot of that is human nature, but going back to what your initial question was, what do you feel is the big reason for this decline? Well, these are all symptoms. These are all things that happen that create this distance or create this dissatisfaction or this frustration or confusion. But I think so much of it is that we've gotten away from, for example, people don't know the Word of God. I'm a firm believer that the Word of God is literally inspired by God. It can be trusted. It gives us the keys. And most people really don't know anything about the Word of God because they've relied on the organization of God, the church.
Sure.
To tell them everything that they need to know. Well, when that organization fails them, then they're confused and disoriented and disillusioned and so I think even conversations like this can be really helpful. I think an organic connection to God is vital, and unfortunately, while a church can provide that, it's definitely not foolproof. And too many times, because of the way we try to interact with culture and try to align with culture, we miss the point, and a lot of people get hurt in the process.
And when we had first talked here a couple weeks ago, I kind of brought forward one of my favorite movies, and it's one of those horror demonic movies called Stigmata. And
still haven't seen it.
Yeah, and it's where the main actor started getting the crown of thorns. She's walking and all of a sudden and her head starts bleeding, and it's just, but what the whole movie, the real premise when it gets to the end was about, it was what the church was hiding to protect itself, to be able to keep making money, when really the whole premise of the show was God's message to us was, and I won't quote it right, was, and I think it was, we looked at the Bible, whether that was split a piece of wood, I'll be there. Turn over a stone and you will find me. Mm-hmm. That goes entirely against what the church is. The church is, here's our building. This is where you'll find God, where God is all around us every day, all the time.
Yeah, one of the problems that we run into as a church organization, and I was in the middle of it, so I know, is you end up you create something that has to be sustained.
Yeah. And
in all of these big mega churches where we see these leaders failing and falling, too oftentimes the story is that what had happened was brought to the elders decades before, and nothing was done. And the reason is because when you have an organization with people's livelihoods tied to the income that they get from it, and thousands of people depending on this thing, and this, there's money and there's power and there's all of these things involved, then all of a sudden we have to make decisions for the equity of the organization, and we have to cut corners. Mm-hmm. And that's the real danger of
it becomes about the organization and not God anymore.
Yeah, and it's always subtle, but this shift begins to take place. And
shift, is that the devil, or is that just human nature?
Yes, and yes. I mean, it's all of that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because and even let's even one more time say, let's take God out of it. Do you believe in good and evil in this world, even if it wasn't a spiritual thing? I do. I think there's very evil things happening in this world, and certainly very good things happening in this world. So without religion, good and evil is still there. But with religion, it actually ties it all together a bit nicely.
Let me challenge your thought on that.
Please.
I think religion is the problem. It's faith that ties it all together, and faith has to be grounded in a belief and a trust in something important, and that
something
thing,
bigger than yourself.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So what religion tries to do, and has tried to do, has always tried to do, is make sense of the thing that we're believing in, right? And every religion has its thing. So religion is a systematized or organized way of incorporating that into life.
Okay.
That's the first copy of the copy,
Sure.
right? And so that's where it begins to be distorted. We have to do a better job. If we've got to help people connect with God. We've got to get out.
How do we do that?
Way.
How does that happen?
We've got to direct people back to the scriptures. We've got to invite people to put their trust. And this is my opinion, but I live by it,
Right.
Rob. I believe we have to help people.
To me, that's what makes a man, Mylan, is if you whatever your convictions are, you live by them.
Yeah.
It's not today, it's my conviction, and tomorrow because I want to do something different, it's a different conviction. Yeah. I mean, I almost had a perfect example. It wasn't all that long ago. I prayed. And then turned around within minutes and did the same thing that I just prayed and asked for forgiveness for.
Welcome to the human race.
Yes,
We've all
thank
done
you.
it.
Yeah.
But it's about being tethered into something that is, it's like putting a foundation on bedrock, right? Yeah. The only bedrock I've found, spiritual bedrock, is Jesus Christ himself. That's if we look at the claims of Jesus Christ, and those claims we are backed up by a story there's tremendous evidence for, that this person claimed to be God. He lived in a way that convinced us that he was God. He could perform miracles. Yeah. He loved, he showed us what it meant to be human, and yet a human under God as his creation, loved and adored by God.
And then to die by human hands.
By choice.
Yeah.
By choice, die by human hands, it's
by choice. That is really, really important, because
absolutely.
If he is as all powerful as the Bible says, all he had to do was wave his hands and everybody would drop dead around him.
Yeah. Yeah. Philippians chapter 2 tells us that Jesus intentionally gave up the qualities of his divine nature, his power, his ability to, cause everybody to drop dead, in order to become a servant. And, you think about a God who owns creation, the universe, being willing to lay down his life for a rebellious creation. You can't make that up.
Yeah. For something that is so flawed.
Yeah.
That, to me, the way things are, the cards are stacked against us.
Yeah.
And when I see what I see today, it seems like, especially when you look at media, there's so much more evil you see on the media than good. They're not reporting on good.
Right.
Does it happen? Yes. But when you live in the media bubble, which most of us do because we like our TVs, everything needs to be, our problems need to be satisfied in a half hour or an hour. We live in this culture that's give it to me, get it to me now. In religion and God is a long game.
Yeah. Well, the media is trying to do exactly what I described the church is trying to do, right? We want to be, we want to please you. We want your attention. We want your money. We want your, whatever.
Eyeballs equals money.
And so as long as we're playing that game, we're screwing it up, right? What we need to do is we need to introduce people to the God who genuinely loves them. The Bible tells us that Jesus came full of grace and truth. Those two things are completely inseparable. And what we find is people that want to focus just on the grace. God loves us no matter what. And so, I sin and I do these things I probably shouldn't do. And my guilty conscience is telling me this. But God loves me enough. And surely a good God wouldn't send anybody to hell.
Sure.
So And then there's other people who focus so much on the truth, right? The religion side. You've got to do this and you've got to do that, and you've got to line yourself up this way and follow all these rules and blah blah blah. And what we find in Jesus Christ is the perfect blend of grace and truth. There is a truth that we have to live by. You asked about the decline in morals and all of that. That is all of us trying to make up our own. And man, we can go back to the Garden of Eden and what happened there, and we probably should at some point.
Well, and actually, let's actually kind of stop what we're doing right now for a minute, because we've I think this has been an absolute great conversation, and it kind of seems like a point where we can say, all right, we really touched on some stuff here, and give everybody something to think about. And we certainly continue this conversation as podcast and another episode goes on. But what I'd like to at least do, because you said, maybe we will, and that's what we talked about the other day, is now jumping back to Genesis and start doing a dive into the Bible, telling some of these, there's some great stories. And they're done by writers. Sometimes maybe things may be embellished a little bit, or maybe we have to look at it in now times, but it was written in then times. So there's a lot of talk to be able to do about the Bible. And I think that's what we talked about getting into next, is kind of having this theological discussion about where religion is and where it's been, where it is now, how do we make it better? And then really start talking about these stories that a lot of people don't get to hear about. Sure. And it all starts with Genesis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that, that sounds like a good place for you. And next time we see you, we want to talk a little bit about Genesis and pick out some passages that you think are, in Genesis, I think that is the longest book in the Bible, is it not?
Oh, no.
It's not?
I don't think it is, no.
Are you sure? Is it the longest book in the Old Testament?
Oh, some of the prophets are longer.
Longer.
Yeah, okay. I believe Jeremiah was pretty long. All right, I just got done with that. So
they actually all kind of seem pretty long when you're reading the Bible, because the Bible is not an easy read.
Oh no, it's not. And it's all interwoven. That's one of the miraculous things about 66 books that all interweave and work together in a pretty profound way.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah. Once you start getting enough information about it, you can see how all of the pieces fit together. It's like building a puzzle, right? The more pieces you start getting together, now I see it. Now I see it.
Eventually becomes a full picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that sounds like a good place to say goodbye on this podcast. I think this was certainly a wonderful first one. Scott got in there a bit. Amanda got to tell some of her. I think we actually got to some personal stories, which I don't think I've ever heard from any of you guys before. So this is almost like a therapy session too. It's pretty good. I'm charging each one of you $100 for this for today. But no, it's certainly awesome. I appreciate you coming in, Mylan. I look forward to doing many more. I'm going to have you on the radio show and help promote your podcast, which you do. So you do have a podcast. What's that all about?
Just started it a few weeks ago, halftime. It's navigating the challenges and joys of midlife. And there's one of the things that I found is
what are the joys? Did you come up with one? Other than harder, when your feet hit the floor first time after sleep, oh boy.
Well, that's part of the midlife quote unquote crisis, is that we get to a place in life where we get a little bit jaded on all the stuff that's happened over the years.
Let me get my back straight before I start walking.
Hey now.
But yeah, it's just it's a podcast with guests who are just sharing their story, their experiences, some of them in midlife and what they're dealing with, that we can all learn from their experiences. Others that have gone through midlife and can look back and say, this is what has shaped my third and fourth quarters of life.
Now, what I do have to ask about midlife is this: when is that? Because most people are saying that when you're 50 years old, that's midlife. No, that's back about 35 probably for our rates of death in this. They were 75 years old as the death rate in United States. And that's just, I'm probably wrong, but it's got to be close to that. So at 30, 35, 36 years old, you're at that halfway point for the most part. So when is midlife?
Well, I've come to, and maybe this is just me, but I've come to see our adult life as two halves.
Okay.
So up until about 20 years old, we're still figuring out who we are, kind of coming of age,
I'm still
kind of
trying
coming
to figure it out.
Yeah, but we kind of set out on our own journey at 18, 20 years
Sure.
old, whatever. And then, and kind of that's kind of the beginning of our story. Everything before that was our family's story. And so I'd say halfway through our mid adult years. But the other caveat is that it's not really about numbers. It's about a stage of life that kind of comes in the middle of, the first half of your adult years are full of energy, up and to the right, moving forward, accomplishing, building,
Sure.
trying to, and then we seem to hit this place, usually between 40 and 60, where, like I said, all of a sudden, life is not what we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it be our health, whether it be our career, whether it be our marriage or our family relationships, all of a sudden we start to go, wait a minute. And we have an opportunity to either dive back in and say, man, I sure did enjoy the early 20s,
Right.
and try to create that again, or to say, no, I've got to really look seriously at life and see how I'm going to conduct and reorganize my life for moving forward.
Yeah, I think somewhere in there's a major brain change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your brain takes a whole different thought process. We become wiser.
Yeah.
A little more analytical. All right.
But we can.
Yeah, yes. Some don't still, but let's think about this before I respond. I learned that I'm upset today. Let's sleep on it before I say something. Let's see what happens tomorrow when I wake up and how I feel about it. Because right now, I'm going to rip someone's head off.
Right.
Well, we don't want to do that. That's not the society that any of us want to live in. That every time someone's mad, they go and commit an assault. And what could you imagine? That was the old West days.
Yeah.
But no, I like what you're doing there. And where can someone find your podcast if they want to listen to you a little bit more?
Yeah, most of my listeners are finding me on YouTube. You can listen or watch there. And you can just, in YouTube, look up Halftime with Mylan Bittenbender.
Okay.
And could you put my link in your show notes here?
You bet I can.
Also on Apple and Spotify.
Yeah, for sure. I will. It'll be in the Podbean in the notes for sure when we in the description.
Good.
Right on. Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying awesome.
Yeah, it was. It was certainly a good talk. It was a great base for us to start and get people thinking about, if you don't want to find God, you can at least be good to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with all that being said, this is all the things they don't want you to talk about. And of course, you can find out more information about this podcast at tabootalkback.com. And you got the crew, the normal crew. And at some point, once I get Mylan in here for another one, I'll get a picture of him on there with his philosopher pose on the website. But yes, thanks again. And to all of you out there, we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome. All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast is part of the Rob Byrd Moondog Podcast Network. Go to tabootalkback.com for more information. Copyright 2024.